Welcome to the Your Voice Matters Women's Retreat. We are shining a light on self-doubt so that you can stop second-guessing yourself and start speaking your truth. I'm your host, Mitzy Mcmahon. Joining us today is Tess McMechan. Tess is a Trauma Integration Practitioner. She specializes in identity work, belief work, childhood trauma, and addiction. And she holds the belief that everyone can heal if they have the right tools. Welcome, Tess. It's so nice to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So you have had a challenging yet amazing journey. And I'm wondering if you would share a little bit of your story with us.
For sure. I was a very sensitive girl, and I always felt quite disconnected from the world and lost in this world. I had quite a dysregulated nervous system because I didn't deal well with life in general, because I was so sensitive. And so I coped with this in my later years, in my late teens and 20s, with substance abuse, and went through some toxic relationships and difficulties. And then I ended up having a near-death experience, which I see now was a wake-up call for me. And it derailed my life in a different way. It forced me to take a hard look at the way I was living, my trauma, and do things in a new way. And so I started a healing journey at that point. And so that was when I was about 28 years old.
Wow. You packed a lot into just a couple of sentences there. So I want to back up a little bit and just talk about growing up and being really sensitive. And was it that you felt disconnected because you were so sensitive? Did you have trouble fitting in? Just walk us through that a little bit.
I felt very much like I had social anxiety, and very much like I didn't fit in. I felt like an alien in this world. And so I kind of lived almost in a fear response, let's say in school. At home, I could be myself and was very authentic and had a lot of fun at home. But out in the world, it was really difficult for me.
Do you have any idea? Were you able to discover what caused that for you?
Yeah. So I had some trauma happen when I was 3, and I created the belief that I wasn't good enough. And so I really had these two parts that I saw within myself. I actually saw them when I was 7 years old. There was the real me, the authentic me that I could be with my family. And then there was this other part where I felt inferior to a lot of people, especially authoritarian figures. So I didn't really understand why I had these two parts within me, but I had them for a very, very long time. And that drove me most of my life. So feeling inferior in school, you're making yourself small. You're having to be small to protect yourself. And so I went through life like that until I started to heal.
Wow, I think that is going to resonate with a lot of our viewers, a lot of our audience. A lot of people experience the feeling of not good enough, not being enough to some degree. So how did you start, or as you explained earlier, you went through a period where you were coping with this by substance abuse. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, in ways I fell into it. It was the crowd that I hung out with. And there's a bit of escapism that I was dealing with for sure. And also there was a part of me that was interested in higher states of consciousness. And so I also played around with that as well. So there's two factors within it.
Yeah, I think the coping mechanism of trying to escape is a common one, where we don't know quite how to handle what we're feeling, not good enough, or self-doubt, or whatever it is that we're trying to work through. So we find ways to deal with it. So you had mentioned that your near-death experience was sort of the catalyst for you to begin your healing. Can you walk us through a little bit of what that healing looked like for you?
Yeah. So my near-death experience woke me up. When I came out, I was completely raw. I also lost everything like physical in my life at that time as well. So I lost my health and my relationship, my dogs, my house, my car, my job, everything, and had to move in with my mother. So my whole identity kind of got washed away. My life was whitewashed. So it left me in this space where I had to really look at myself. But first, the doctors had put me on Oxycontin. And so this became actually the point where it was really bad, turned into a bad addiction for about a year because of everything that I had gone through. And so I had chose to get off those, and I had no choice but to go within. I had to look at myself. Otherwise, I would continue down a really dark path. So I actually had a spiritual teacher that was put on my path that my mom found. She was from India, and she helped people to start to look at themselves and do inner work and peel back the layers that really keep you from your true self and your authenticity, and to wake up more.
And that's really where the work is, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
have to go in. Maybe you can't answer this question, but if you hadn't have had this happen to you, this near-death experience, what might your life have looked like?
I might actually have stayed in the relationship I was in, and which was not a very healthy relationship. I might have ended up having children and gone down a path that was more what's the word I'm looking for? Traditional, I guess. Not seeing what I really want, more kind of just falling into what life is. And I may not have gotten over the addiction that I had. So I'm not quite sure where it would have led, but it would have been a very different path than where I am today.
Yeah. Does the path that you're on now feel much more authentic?
It does. Yeah. I feel a lot of joy, and I'm so happy that I went through the near-death experience, and I'm so happy the way my life has gone.
So can you speak a little bit about what being authentic means for you, about being able to find your voice and how that has shaped and changed your life?
Yeah, so it's about really finding out what is blocking you from your authenticity. So I didn't even know who I was at that point. I didn't even know what authentic meant. And so it was peeling back the layers, like people pleasing was a big one, and lots of different coping mechanisms that I had adapted as my personality to be accepted in this world. And so when I started to see what parts of my personality were developed to cope or to be accepted, I started to peel back those layers and then look at where I had low self-esteem, and started to become empowered within. And so that started to help me to step into my voice. And I made it a priority to step into my voice because I had shut down my voice so much to the point where I cultivated an autoimmune disorder in my thyroid. And so that's been a big, big journey for me, is my voice.
Wow. That happens to so many people, I think, without even realizing. A couple of things you said there that really struck me as not even knowing who you were. I think a lot of us wear masks, right? Like the people pleasing you mentioned, adopted as coping mechanisms, right? But they get in the way of who we really are. Yeah. So what would you say to someone who might be watching, who finds himself in this very situation where they feel compelled to either wear masks that cover who they really are, or they're people pleasing? What would you say to them?
I would say start to get curious about these masks. Don't shame yourself for these masks. Everybody wears masks until they become aware of them. And so I would start to get curious and self-inquire. So self-inquiry is the greatest tool we can use. And we can do it in a light way, and start to see in your relationships where you're authentic and where you're inauthentic. when you're speaking with someone, are you choosing to shut down your voice? Are you scared to speak your voice? Why are you scared? Is it because you're scared you won't be accepted, or that you'll be judged, or you'll be criticized? And so start to just look at these things and start to unravel these parts within why you do the things you do, or why you wear the masks. And then what's underneath, right? Is there an inferiority complex that's been developed? And that's from trauma. It's usually trauma in childhood. So just getting curious about these things and taking the dedication and steps to say, I'm going to start this healing journey and I'm capable to do this.
I love the idea, what you said about just be curious and start looking. I think curiosity can be a great friend, especially when we're doing
It is.
work, our inner work. So you work with clients doing childhood trauma type work, right? Is that one of the things that you do?
Yeah, I work with people with their childhood trauma to understand the coping mechanisms and the masks. And so to peel those back. And so they can understand what that looks like, because sometimes it can feel really messy and you don't really know what's what. So I help people be able to identify those things and how to take the steps to heal.
So you mentioned something about core beliefs are created from trauma, and you mentioned that happened to you when you were 3. So can you speak a little bit to how those core beliefs, I mean, I know trauma creates them, but then how they impact us as we go through life?
Yeah, so usually when children are disapproved of in some way, their authenticity, they'll suppress their authenticity, and what replaces that is a belief system, a limiting belief. And so that it's usually like, I'm not important, I don't matter, I'm a burden, I'm not good enough, and so on. And so they will believe that that's who they are and suppress the authenticity. And so that's where the mask is developed and where the sense of self is developed, or lack of sense of self. And so this affects us every day in our lives in all aspects, because these parts are driving us. And so at the core, doing belief work is what helps to break down those beliefs, to see that they were never true in the first place.
I think that's a really important piece, when we understand that we may have adopted something that's not even true for us.
Absolutely.
Right? And then that impacts the way we show up in the world and the way we even see ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, it really affects the way we see ourselves.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or tricks that you can share on how somebody might get started with this work? I know you sort of encourage people to be curious, but is there something specific that worked for you that you might share?
Yeah, I actually just really observed my relationships. And so this takes, it takes taking accountability within. And so not pointing the finger outward, but taking full responsibility. And so I looked at my judgments of others that would come up, because it's natural to happen, and how I felt, and how, what did that bring up within myself? And so I started to really do that, and that will help you to understand yourself on a deeper level, because what we see in others is usually within us as well, and it's our shadow aspects. And so we can learn a lot through that and heal through that, and start to cultivate compassion for ourselves and for the other. And then also looking at, like I spoke before, where you're authentic and inauthentic, and what's holding you back from that. And so you can do all that all on your own. Like you can talk to as many people within the day, and you can just observe and watch yourself. And you want to do it with a lightheartedness. You don't want to judge yourself, because it's easy to judge ourselves when we see if we're critical on others or ourselves. So you don't really want to be light with it and just come from a curious nature.
That's a really good point. And it strikes me that it might be difficult even to be open and objective when looking at how we show up or how we interact with people, right? I mean, sometimes it feels like there's a denial that's in place, or a defense mechanism that comes up that might get in the way of being objective. Yeah,
Yeah. Denial is used as a coping mechanism because it's too hard to see or to own up to or to look at. And so it's actually there as a protection. But the more that you work with this and you can even see your denial and be honest with yourself, I'm denying myself of this, then you're calling it out, right? And it'll start to reveal itself. More will be revealed to you when you're supposed to see it. And so it's a journey. And
right.
there is self-judgment in the beginning. I remember when I started, I was quite judgmental of myself, but you learn to become compassionate. And you learn to see that as well.
Compassion is truly a beautiful thing. And so often we deny ourselves that.
Yeah, it's the most important thing in healing and in life, I think, is to be compassionate towards ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. So you had mentioned that you had manifested or cultivated, I think you said, an issue with your throat, using your voice. So how is that for you today? Are you able to speak up and speak your truth and use your voice?
Yeah. It's been a long journey. It's been like a decade of really stepping into that. But I made it my top priority, and it's shifted a lot. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And no more people pleasing left in me.
Awesome. Yeah, I think our healing journeys are just that. They're journeys, right? The next layer comes up when we're ready to look at it, when we have the tools ready, available to dismantle and heal it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are so many layers, and it's a continuous journey. There's still more. I'm not at my full potential within my voice, but I'm on the journey. So
yeah, well, it's amazing. So I understand that you have a free gift that you'd like to share with our audience. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's an ebook, and it's about some of the things that we spoke about today, and it goes into how trauma disconnects us from our authenticity. And then there's actually a worksheet that people can use to learn how to step into their authenticity and find their limiting beliefs that may be driving them.
Wow.
And so it's a step-by-step.
That sounds fabulous. Yeah. Exactly what we were talking about is really helpful. So thank you so much. For those watching, please be sure to click the link below to pick up Tess's free offering. Is there anything any last insights you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, just when you're on this journey, it's really a journey about self-love. And self-love is not selfish. There's a lot of talk about, self-love being selfish, but it's not. If you can't fill your cup first and take care of yourself, you really can't help others. So it's not selfish to walk on that journey of healing and moving towards self-love and acceptance.
Yeah, it's so true. I just wanted to ask you one last question. So through everything that you have gone through in your life and this journey, the trauma, the addictions, the near-death experience, would you change any of it?
No. That's the biggest thing I've taken from all of it, and where I've come to now is everything is perfect, and everything that happens in reality, no matter how hard it is perfect. And there's beauty within the hardships, and there's depth within the hardships. And so I'm so grateful to those hardships.
Yeah, sometimes they offer us a perspective that we can't get otherwise.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your story and your insights and your wisdom. It's been really wonderful having you.
Thank you. It's been so great to be here too.
And so for those watching, please be sure to click the link below to pick up Tess's free offering, and be sure to tune back in for the rest of our Your Voice Matters retreat. Thanks for joining us today.